Okay, you might think I'm a little bit rash, but what we're going to be doing is we're going to have this week. We're going to have at the end next week, 1 week from today. The plan is that we're going to have a test on. We're not doing not the regular reading test. We're going to have a test on just knowing the back and forth of the Gemara from the beginning of what we learned until almost the daf of Gemara. So we'll see. Let's begin now. I'm going to set it up for you. Definitely take notes while we're doing this. And here we go. So we began the Mishnah on Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. It talked about the Megillah had two things about it. Number one, you could read it sitting and standing, okay? And you could have two people reading it at the same time and still fulfill your mitzvah. Okay? Then the Gemara, so far so good. You could say Megillah, you could do it standing, you could do it sitting. And you could have two people reading at the same time. We learned that there's a minhag that if there's a minhag to make a bracha on the Megillah, you may. If not. If there's no minhag, then you may not make a bracha. We're going to see later on what this is referring to. It'll be later on this page. Which bracha of the Megillah. It's not all brachas really. You do have to make a bracha on the Megillah. We'll soon see which bracha is the discussion about. Okay, that's the third halacha so far. And that's really the end of Megillah now. So the first three halachas of Megillah. Number one, about sitting and standing. You could do both. Number two, you could have two people reading, or one person, or even two people reading. And number three, the third halacha is that whether or not you make a certain bracha on the Megillah depends on the custom. Fine. Now the Mishnah, the Gemara goes into a rule about there's certain times it goes into regular Kriyas HaTorah. Sometimes it's 3 aliyos, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 5 aliyos, sometimes it's 6, and sometimes it's 7 aliyos. And that's the tap. The 3 is, and it really goes, the way to remember it, is it goes in the ascending order of Kedusha. It goes on a regular day, and Shabbos at Mincha, 3 aliyos. It goes at Rosh Chodesh, if we're going to have a Musaf, like for Rosh Chodesh, we daven Musaf, or there's a Karban Musaf, we have 4 aliyos, or Chol HaMoed, the weekday part of Yom Tif, like Pesach's in between days, Sukkot's in between days, we have 4 aliyos. 5 aliyos are on the Yom Tif itself, not the Chol HaMoed, but like the first days of Pesach, last days of Pesach, first days of Sukkot, Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, 5 aliyos. 5 people come read the Torah. On Yom Kippur, we have 6, and fascinatingly, Shabbos is 7. Shabbos seems to be the most holy, even more than Yom Kippur, which we discussed a little bit, if you were in that conversation. Now, we also learned, the interesting thing to point out in this Gemara is that starting from 5 aliyos, the same thing that has 5 aliyos, Yom Kippur, and Shabbos, we have Haftorah. The other times we do not read the Haftorah, okay? So Rosh Chodesh and Chol HaMoed and weekday, we don't have the Haftorah. And the final thing to remember about this Mishnah is that, not the final thing at all. Also, when can you add and when could you subtract? So we learned the same thing, that if you can never subtract, but you may add. On Yom Tif, from 5 aliyos on, you may add. So it has Haftorah, and it has another characteristic, is that you may add on to the tefillah. You may add aliyos. So you could have, say, on Yom Kippur, you could have 7 people reading if you wish. Okay, fine. Then we also learned that the custom in the Mishnah also pointed out another fascinating thing, is that in the time of the Mishnah, that it depended on they made a bracha. The first guy made the bracha beforehand, and the last guy made a bracha afterwards, and that was it. We didn't have like what we do nowadays, that every person makes a bracha before and after. There was one bracha before altogether the reading of the Torah, and there was one bracha after the reading of the Torah. Period. Fine. Let's go further. The Gemara says, this that we are allowed to stand or sit is only by Megillah, but not by the Torah. Okay, the Gemara is beginning. It's not by the Torah, and the Gemara learns this out from an interesting source of Moshe. Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, stand with me. So we see that when at Har Sinai, when he was teaching Moshe Rabbeinu the Torah, he stood. Hashem was kaviyachol. Hashem doesn't have a body, but whatever it means, Hashem presents it in this way, that he's standing and along with Moshe. They're supposed to be on the same level, and so reading the Torah is like that. We also learned that a Rebbe, when he teaches his student, they should be on the same level. Or at least the Rebbe shouldn't be sitting on a chair and the students on the floor. It should be that they're both seated, either both on the floor or both seated. That's how Torah should be taught. Because we learn again from Hashem. Hashem stood together on the same level as Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, the Gemara does a fascinating thing that at the time, from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu until Rabbi Gamliel, which was in the time of the Mishnayos, everybody, when they learned Torah, they stood. It was a respect for the Torah, seemingly. They all had a power, but then when Rabbi Gamliel died, a sickness came into the world, and people needed to begin to sit. And so they did. And the honor of Torah was diminished because people just sat when they learned, instead of it was this amazing thing. And whenever people did other things, you read a book, you sat. When you studied social studies, you sat. When you studied English, you sat. When you got to Torah, everybody stood. It was an honor to Torah, but what could we do? There was a sickness that came into the world. Now the final thing on this page, the Gemara asks a contradiction in the Psukim. We brought the pasuk earlier that Moshe Rabbeinu was told to stand on Har Sinai. However, there's another pasuk that says he sat, or it shouldn't say it sat because that will be up for debate, but it says v'eshev bahar, which is usually translated as sitting. However, the Gemara answers, so was he sitting or was he standing? That's the contradiction to remember. The Gemara answers four things, 4 possible answers. Number 1, he was not, when he learned it the first time he stood, when he reviewed it on his own, he wasn't in the presence of Hashem, he sat, Moshe Rabbeinu sat, so he stood and sat. That's answer number 1. Answer number 2 is he was leaning, or like this, he was leaning. That leaning counts as sitting and as standing. Answer number 3, the language of yeshiva does not mean to sit specifically. It means to dwell there, to remain there, to be there. So Moshe Rabbeinu didn't mean he was sitting. He remained there. How was his body? He was standing. Answer number 4 is that the easy parts, he stood, but when he needed a lot more concentration, harder parts, he sat. I imagine it has to do with the concentration level required. That is the end of this part. I'm going further, actually. I'm keeping it all in one video. Here we go. Karo echad karu shnayim yatsu. They read 2 and they read 1. Said the Mishnah. Now take the second halacha in the Mishnah, that you could, by Megillah, regarding Megillah, you're allowed to have 2 people. You could have them sitting, you could have them 2 people reading at one time. But with Torah, not. Why not? So the Gemara explains. The Gemara brings down a brisa that tells us the difference. And it tells us certain more rules also. By Torah, you could only have 1 person reading, and they used to have a translator, 1 person translating. By Navi, by Haftorah, you could have 1 person reading, and you could have 2 people translating. That Rashi explains to us is because there isn't so much halacha. It's not as important to Navi for them to get it perfectly. There won't be mistakes in their actions caused as much, and so therefore we allowed for 2 people to translate. By Hallel and Megillah, you could even have 10 people reading and 10 people translating. What's the difference? Explain the Gemara. Because these things are more interesting, they're more dear to people. Megillah and Hallel, people are more engaged by them, and therefore they'll concentrate more. As opposed to the Torah, right? Now we have to speak this out, I see. As opposed to the Torah, where people are less engaged. They don't know it as well. They're less focused on it. Perhaps it's like Avigdor said, because people spend less. It's regular. It's mundane to them. It happens every Monday. It happens every Thursday. It might be much holier. It is much holier. But at the same time, people are more used to it. Or perhaps the story is less engaging than the story of the Megillah. You're learning a halacha like this, a halacha like that, as opposed to a story. People are interested, and we recognize that, and therefore we notice that by Torah, it has to be, we need to make it very easy to hear the words. But by Megillah, by Hallel, it's enough to say it. Even 10 people, it's so interesting. People are pulled into it on their own. They're pulled into it. Says the Gemara now. Go further in the Gemara. The Gemara says, if we quotes the next, you see again 2 dots to 2 dots, 4 words. It's a quote from the Mishnah. A place that has the minhag to make a bracha, you make a bracha. A place you don't have the minhag to make a bracha on the Megillah, you don't make a bracha on the Megillah. Said the Gemara. Now this is only true about the bracha afterwards, because a bracha before a mitzvah, as we've discussed already this year, is you always have to make a bracha before you do a mitzvah, with the exception of Ben Adam Lechavero, as we discussed. But so all brachos get a bracha over Lasiyasan. The Gemara goes to describe the language here about over Lasiyasan, why the language over means before, and it proves it with psukim. The word over is the way it's said over this halacha, that you make a bracha before doing a mitzvah. It doesn't say kodem the mitzvah, which is a normal word for before. Rather, it says over. So the Gemara proves here why over means before. In any case, the Gemara says before read the Megillah, you make the brachas, you make 3 brachas actually. And the way to remember them is monach, the word rest. The Gemara gives a rashi teva, mem nun chet. What is it? What is monach? So it's the mitzvah to read the Megillah, mikra Megillah. It's a shechiyana with a chet. And nun is the mitzvah is mem, mikra Megillah. Nun is sha'asa nisim. Nun is nisim. Hashem did miracles for us. We make that bracha before reading the Megillah. And chet is for shehechiyanu. He made us live. We thank Hashem for allowing us to live to this point. So that is obligatory. You must do that. Monach is obligatory. The bracha afterwards that we do, we happen to have the custom to make the bracha. So it's this whole, it's Aravis, Rivanu, Danas, Dinenu, Nikam, Hanokim, es Nikmasenu, Vanifralanu, Mitzarenu. The Gemara goes through the entire bracha of what, goes through the entire bracha, fine. And that's the bracha, that's the bracha. The bracha after, remember this, the bracha after the Megillah, that's the bracha that is up for debate, not for debate, but dependent on whether or not there's a custom to make it or not. The 3 brachas before the Megillah, you definitely have to make them. It's the bracha after the Megillah that is the topic of our Mishnah that says whether or not, that discusses whether or not you must make the bracha afterwards. Fine. Now, says the Gemara. The Gemara wants to know an interesting assumption. The Gemara has an interesting assumption. Whether or that these 3, where did the Chachamim get 3? Nothing is random. Important thing to know. There's nothing that we do in Yiddishkeit, nothing that we do in Judaism that is just random. It's just because the rabbis they said it should be that way. No, it's not like that. Okay, nothing is like that. What it is why 3? Says the Gemara, it's opposite certain things. Reb Asi says it's Keneged Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. We have like a representation of Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. So we have 3 readers. Rava says it's connected to Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim. We connect each aliyah is opposite these 3 types of people. Why? Okay. So if this is true that nothing is random, so what is the yud? We also knew halacha that you need 3 readers and they can never read less than 10 psukim. Where does the 10 psukim come from? 10 psukim comes from either there's a few options of why we always need to have 3 readers and at least 10 psukim. Where do we get that from? It's like this. 10 batlanim. There was a halacha that we used to have this. I don't think we have this anymore. We used to have 10 people who we would pay them to stay in the Beit Midrash, stay in the shul, that there should always be a minyan. In our shul, we want there to always, never a time that Hashem's Shechina could come and it's just our shul, our Beit Midrash is just empty. 10 people, they were paid to learn Torah, and they would stay there, and always, and ever a minyan was not needed. We knew for sure there was always going to be a minyan in town. And this was opposite those 10 people, in honor of those 10 people, opposite those 10 people, we have 10 psukim. Another possibility, Rabbi Yosef says, why 10? Because Hashem created the world with 10 statements, including Bereshit. Bereshit is one of the statements, and otherwise, if you look in this past week's parasha Bereshit, you'll see 9 times that Hashem says the word Amar, that he created, or the Devar Hashem, that Hashem spoke and then he created something. So those were the 10 utterances that Hashem created the world with. Okay, new topic. Now, if there are 10 psukim, and we have 3 aliyos, that would mean, and there's also a rule that the Gemara knows already, but it doesn't speak out here, that no one aliyah could be less than 3 psukim. Okay, so Obviously, if 3 equals 9. One of these guys, when you have 10 psukim, you need one of them has to be 4 psukim. One of the readers has to read 4 psukim. Who should read that 4th pasuk? So the Gemara here says that there's reasons to say the first guy should.